With Diana.
I put it on Facebook. I was talking, she was taking sent a message wanting to know.
When you look at those now, you can put anything. And we don't need to even frame it this way.
It's like 1,200 or something like that.
Yeah.
Just from my work. I'm sitting there, I was going to say that that's all
right here. Our land is right here. Right now, we're over in the corner of Comins.
That's about done.
And that's how you step out front.
Like that. Yeah. How you doing? Good. We can go this way.
That's the next part.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, grown up.
Yeah, we're getting done.
Tell them Tom and the guy.
17.
We might start a little bit late because people are still coming.
And then we start today. And they don't really know what to count. Absolutely. That's what we want. No concern about the, no concerns about the.
And the setback height. Then I won't need a variance.
You have as much to say as right to get big Anything. They can say all they want. I mean, the town. You had a really good Are you going to introduce the evening and then I'm going to introduce Chris?
Try Paula.
And you have a sense of framing.
I'm fine. Well, hello. Yeah. You live in Clifton? Oh, they told me I can't go. I see you. Yeah. I wanted to know. Because I have my too.
You're welcome, Karen.
Well, I have to leave. I have a meeting at 6:30 in Orange. I know. I want to. I already found out some things. Yes, you can see right up through. I know Bob and Sugar. He was like, oh, these are I think it's going to be I noticed yesterday coming back from the food cover thing, because in church that He still does it. Patty Carly, Alvin.
Nice to see everybody here. Thank you for coming. I'm Jessica Gregg. I'm on the Comins Task Force on Lynn. And we wanted to have tonight to tell you more about the petition that's going to be voted on, the petition amendment that's going to be voted on next Tuesday, and how we think that town cook can reach it. So we're going to start the meeting off by introducing our guest speaker.
I'll introduce Chris. And before I introduce Chris, thanks everybody for coming. It's really good to see folks. And we wanted this night to be a little bit of fun too. So I'm not going to go too far off topic, but I'm going to give you just a little bit of Maine humor. Okay? Maine humor is humor you don't need to laugh. Right? This is a poem that's got some age on it, probably 110 years old now, by Holman Day. And it does pertain to the Clifton Task Force on Wind and what we've been doing and working at. And it's about two frogs. Some of you may have heard it at a Comins Hall show upstairs. At some point in it, I'll stop and make sure you're all with me, okay? Because it's 100-year-old language, which is a little Shakespearean. There lived two frogs, so I've been told, by a quiet wayside pool. And one of those frogs was a blamed bright frog. But the other frog was a fool. Now a farmer man with a big milk pan was wont to pass that way. And he used to stop and add a drop of the aqua pure, they said. This is what I'm going to, you with me? He used to stop and add a drop of the aqua pure, they say. You know why he did that? The aqua pure is water. He'd stop and he'd add some water to the milk on the way to town so that he could have more milk. Wasn't exactly honest. That's what he did. Well, it chanced one morn in the early dawn, when the farmer's sight was dim, he scooped those frogs in the water he took, which same was a joke on him. Now the fool frog sank in the swashing tank as the farmer bumped to town. But the smart frog flew like a tugboat screw, and he swore he'd not go down. And he kicked and splashed, and he slammed and thrashed, and he stayed on top through all. And he churned that milk in first-class shape into a great big butterball. When the farmer got to town and opened the can, he found the fool frog drowned. But hail and sound, the kicker, she hopped away. Moral: don't fret your life with needless strife, but let this teaching stick. Sometimes, my friends, in the world's big can, it sometimes pays to kick. On day. Now we got Chris O'Neill. Chris is head of Friends of Maine Mountains. Friends of Maine Mountains was created after the Wind Act was enacted in Maine, which was, an act written by the industry and slammed through, and everybody thought it was wonderful, and I think it passed the legislature unanimously. And then, things fell apart when people realized what was actually happening and what had been passed. So Friends of Maine Mountain was created to represent the interests of small towns and people under duress all over Maine. And that's what Chris has been doing since then. He's a former legislator from 1996 through 2004 from Saco, where he lives now. And thanks a million, Chris, for coming up. And Stage is yours.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you all for kind of getting together like this. I run around the state oftentimes and I get asked to tell people about wind power, or go fight with people about wind power, or testify in the legislature about wind power. It's a subject that most of us start out with, including myself. We start out thinking, well, gee, it's pure, it's green, it's clean, it's free, it's progressive, it's new, it doesn't pollute. What the heck could possibly be wrong? Pete mentioned I was in the legislature back when Angus King was governor. I was out campaigning one day in my neighborhood, and I'm knocking on doors with my little daughter, and I said, she said, Daddy, it's windy today. And we got talking about wind, and an old fellow who was out in the garden talking with me said, we need more of that wind power. Why don't you sponsor a bill for that? So I said, okay, this was probably about 1997, 1998. So I put it on my list of legislation to pass. I thought, I'm a Democrat, I'm a greenie, I'm a tree hugger, I'm an avid outdoorsman, I'm a volunteer Appalachian Trail maintainer. I've done Katahdin 3 dozen times. I've done a lot of backwoods in Maine. And I thought, well, geez, that's going to keep you with me. So I went in and I sponsored this bill that would increase Maine's renewable portfolio standard because wind is free. And I got my hat handed to me by power producers and everybody else in industry that thought I was nuts. And I just didn't quite get it. 10 years later, the legislature passed the Wind Act unanimously. And I said, well, gee, if this was after I left the legislature, because where was I when that could have happened? What I learned was that, we had a different situation. And much of what we talk about as a nonprofit 501c3 is, we can't really get involved in politics so much, but we try to educate people on otherwise complicated technical esoteric issues. And what we found was just borne out a couple of weeks ago by a poll that we had commissioned. What we find is learn more, like less. Just the same way I learned more and stunned a lot of my old colleagues when I came back and got this gig and kind of went back in the State House as they called me a NIMBY and a wind hater and all this sort of thing. It's not really where we live. We try to live in the realm of facts. There's one of our documents reproduced back there. It's called 20 Facts About Wind. And the point of it is this. Most of us start out with this really elevated value of what this is worth. Value for our community, value for the state, value for the country, value for the world, for the climate, for the children. But we end up with this kind of mythical value that, in fact, is almost always much lower than what it is. And then we also start off with a cost. And when I talk about cost, I talk about all impacts, environmental impacts, financial costs, et cetera, that we think is much lower than it really is. What our job is to kind of get on the scale and show people where it lines up. The poll we just did, we hired Critical Insights. They do this poll every 6 months. It's the spring tracking poll. They ask who you're going to vote for governor. Do you support Paul Quinn Ray, et cetera, and this is the most reputable pollster in Maine. It cost us a little bit of money that we saved up to do it, and what we found was we've been tired of hearing the wind industry and all their allies recite to us that 88% of all Maine people love wind power and they're in favor of kind of laying down the standards in their own town and in their county and in their state to accommodate it. And we kept saying, well, this must be the way they're asking the question. Because we know that when the Wind Act was pushed through the legislature, oil was $149 a barrel. Now it's around 100, which is still high. Gasoline was pushing $4 a gallon. This is in 2007, 2008. We were in a horrible recession. We were in a war in Iraq. And all those things were used to justify wind power. And now when we see these industry polls that say 88% of people like wind power, the question is generally this. If So what we did was we almost reversed it. We found that 78%, we asked several different questions, but the bottom line was 78% of those people who used to be 88% in favor, once they learned more, they learned that, you know, we use less than, we get electricity from oil to the tune of less than 1% in the nation and in Maine. And they learned certain of these facts, and they learned the value. We came up at almost 80% unfavorable. That probably doesn't have a whole lot to do with what you're worried about, because you've got ordinances in front of you, competing ordinances at different times, which to me, I've not seen. We've worked with dozens of towns around the state. By my count, I think it's 39 organized towns and 4 townships that we've seen write reasonable setback ordinances and sound ordinances, etc. Decommissioning is all sorts of standards to consider. There's only been a handful of them, yours one of them, that wrote an ordinance that was really negligent, or deficient in protecting people's property rights. Now you're having another bite at the apple, or a couple of bites at the apple, and I applaud you for taking the time. Because what we found in all those towns, with the exception of the 3 or 4, is that when you call time out and you really learn, you have a better perspective on value, and your level of protection goes up. Your desired level of protection goes up. It's my hope that with all the local information that will follow my general information that you'll talk about when I'm done in a few minutes, it's my hope that you as a community are tiring of the divisiveness, you're tiring of the hyperbole and the claims and the fighting and the backbiting. You probably have drama going on here, family against family. It happens in every community when wind comes to town. And I don't know who this developer is. He sounds like a local guy from Bangor who might be a decent guy, but we're going to tell you that his industry is decent. So I just want to run through a few general points that we talk about with people to give you a perspective of how much you're willing to sacrifice to accommodate an industry that can really, that will change your community and maybe change your life. We're told that, you know, we got to get off of oil. I already touched on that. We got off of oil several years ago. There was a time when Maine got over 25% of its electricity from oil, and now we're down below 1%. We're going to talk a little bit about that. There's an ironic twist to that in a minute. Do we need new generation? We have 4,400 megawatts generating capacity. Like I have a gas tank. I can go so far. We have 4,400 megawatts of capacity. This project's going to be what, like 12.5 megawatts? Something like that. It's a drop in the bucket. But generally, Maine uses on a daily basis 1,200 to 1,500 megawatts. So we're already quadruple capacity. There's a fairly new gas plant over in BZ. Maybe you've seen it. It's a 500 plus megawatt, beautiful machine of a plant. It burns fossil fuels, yes, not coal, not oil. That thing ran last year at less than 10% of capacity. They have overhead. They have people working there. They got to keep the lights on. There are plants like that all over Maine that are sitting idle and losing money because we're dumping resources into a modality in wind power that can't carry the load for the grid. Something's going to break. The fear is, if you're the host community of one of these things, and after rapid depreciation, they go belly up and walk away like people did in the foreclosure crisis and leave the keys. Not only do you get kind of shafted on the blight, you can get shafted on the cost too. So Maine doesn't really need the electricity. The ISO New England grid that we're a part of forecasts less than 1% annual growth in demand for electricity in the next 20 years. Maine has to do its part, right? We're part of the globe, so we ought to help the globe. We're the 3rd cleanest state in the nation for electricity generation. 3rd cleanest. Idaho and Vermont are ahead of us. Vermont's almost all nuclear. Idaho's a lot of hydro and nuclear. That's pretty clean. We've got the highest renewable portfolio standard in the nation, #1. And unlike a lot of other states, transportation, there are different sectors, industrial, household, transportation, electricity, where CO2 is counted. This one blew me away when I learned it. Transportation in Maine accounts for 4 times the amount of CO2 that electricity generation does. Does that mean we're off the hook? No. In the nation, electricity accounts for more than transportation. I'm not saying we're off the hook, but we're certainly doing our part. Meanwhile, I just drove up from Portland and Augusta today. I benefited from being able to go 5 miles an hour faster because the legislature unanimously threw gas on that plane by raising the speed limit. And these are the same legislators who are worried about putting up windmills to stop CO2. Just a little twist. A couple more facts that I think, I hope, help put it into perspective for you. If Maine's goal, they put in the statute when we wrote this law, to build 2,700 megawatts of wind is realized. At the proper spacing for these things, you need to cover about 300 miles of bridge. That's about the distance on the interstate from Kittery to Holcomb, almost Prescott. What do you get for that? Well, first, the cost of it will probably be anywhere from $7.5 billion to $9 billion. That comes out of taxpayer ratepayer pockets. What do you get for it? It'll produce less than 5% additional electricity to the grid. And it's not the kind of electricity that you can flick on and off. Okay, sometimes it's not this, sometimes it needs to be backed up with conventional. It's kind of a luxury. And while it is clean and clean and doesn't create emissions per se, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good. If the basic premise is if CO2 is a problem, I don't argue about reproductive rights or global warming or about firearms rights or anything like that. You don't win those arguments with people who hiss at each other, so I don't get into it. But I say this, we know that CO2 is rising in the world. It's rising at 500 million metric tons a year since about 1980. It's pretty heavy. If we just wanted to stop the increase in CO2 emissions globally, not reduce it, but just stop level it, we would need, right now we've got about 60,000 megawatts of wind installed in America. We would need almost 400,000 megawatts of wind power installed every year, just to hold the range. That would take up the space of New England times about 2. And of course, that I'm talking about covered, so nobody could live there. You'd have to eat up that much real estate every year at a cost of hundreds of billions of dollars. So yeah, just to let you know that you're feeling this tug. Geez, I got to vote for this ordinance because it's saving the frogs. Sorry, Pete. You're really not. And I'm going to show you an illustration in a second that'll make you pull your hair out. You know that when we need electricity, it's got to be there on the grid. It's called reliability. It's called dispatchability. And Maine is one of the cleanest electricity generating states in the country. But if we decide that we want to introduce these things intermittently around the countryside, what we found is it's a progressive thing. It's incremental. They go for the little project, get their roots set. And I don't really, I've been around here, I've always wanted to do some climbing around here, but my suspicion is there's several ridges out here that would be targeted. So 5 today, could be 15 tomorrow, could be 30. Some of them go for the whole enchilada at first. This guy's not one of the big wheel, like First Wind or either Grola, but who knows, every store's for sale for the right price. Every single time we put these things too close to people, and too close is inexact science. Topography, wind, weather, time of day, humidity, all make a difference. But every single time in Maine and elsewhere we've seen that these are put too close to people. They're unresolved issues. It's shadow flicker. You can ride your snowmobile by them and say, oh, they're graceful, they're pretty and all that, but when you live on them, day in, day out, you hear a whoop, 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 and your dog runs around in circles, and you get headaches and earaches, and you can't sleep, and you get hypertension that causes other diseases. You go crazy. And the kicker is your property's worth less and you can't sell it. Every time. There are ways to protect against that. If I thought wind power was a great solution, I would at least say, all right, not right in my backyard. It's okay to say, not in my backyard. These are toys. They're huge industrial machines. Change the air pressure. 24 hours a day, it'll drive you nuts. So, that's our experience. I'll finish up. Just a little on, we talk a lot about economics, not just environmentalism. The cost of these things is a house of cards is going to cave in. Is going to cave in. The industry's a well-oiled PR machine, but we have invested $1 billion, I say spent, since the Wind Act in Maine on wind turbines. It doesn't count all the transmission that's needed, because this is like a tractor trailer that's got no steering. It goes down the highway in these 8 lanes because it's sputters. You need a lot of transmission, which is costly. But we spent $1 billion just in Maine on these turbines for about 400 megawatts. Again, that's, you're talking a little over 1% capacity for the grid, not even 1% performance for the grid. And every penny of that is coming out of your ratepayer pocket or your taxpayer pocket. If we get to 20% of the grid's capacity for wind power, the ISO New England did a report a couple of years ago that estimated it will cost $19 billion to $25 million. That's money that's being sucked out of our economy that could be spent on food and cars and tractors and college educations or whatever. But it's reflected in incrementally higher rates. So we're really watching that stuff too. It's a travesty if it happens. I had a note here that I wrote for you that was stunning. If we were to get, let me start with the baseline. Maine's electricity generation is responsible for 1.4% of all CO2 emissions in the world. 1.4%. If we were to do that big buildup, we would reduce it by 0.04%. I don't know if that's a good trade-off for 300 miles of bridge, especially if it's in your backyard.
Can you say that again? I just need to hear it.
Yeah,
I don't follow it.
I hate to do that stuff. Put it this way. Picture a football field. If we build the main wind goal, it's gonna have an effect. There will be, you don't get a windmill turning in Clifton. For every second it's turning in Clifton, a coal plant in Connecticut doesn't shut down. Doesn't work that way. The coal plants run 24/7, base load power. The wind power is kind of, they have little contracts and that sort of thing. But assuming that it operated at a reasonable level, which is a stretch, I'm being generous. And this is the industry's projections. We would reduce CO2 by an inch on a football field if we built these wind towers all over Maine. If you want to measure it against U.S. CO2 emissions, it's about a blade of grass on a football field, reduction that we get. Again, trade-offs. Are there other ways to recoup that blade of grass or that inch? I think so. But, again, I don't want to put the weight of the world on you all, but just in case you had that inclination to vote for the thing because you want to do great good to mankind, I want to disavow you of that. And I'll finish up. If you want to extract that money from the Maine economy, you and I don't see it. We certainly will feel that Maine's not the richest state in the country. Right now, there's a collaboration of 6 New England governors that have, for the last year, been talking about a crisis that a lot of us don't even read about in the paper. But the BDN Matt Stone did a nice piece on it and some other coverage 4 months ago. It's this. Luckily, we have abundant, the world's greatest and cheapest natural gas supply just the other side of New York City, the Marcellus Shale. Yeah, it's fracking, it's dirty, it's fossil fuel, but it's a heck of a lot better than coal or oil, and it works. Unfortunately, on days when they're paying X, let's say X is 5 cents in New York and Pennsylvania, we're paying 25 and 30 to 50 cents here, especially at peak load moments. On real cold or real hot days, it's a crisis industry. Madison Paper and other mills last winter had to close. They call their workers in the morning and say, the forecast is for electricity costs to go up that high and gas costs also, because gas costs drive electricity costs. You can't come to work today. That's not good. That's really bad for our economy and our people. All the consumers and all the businesses that hook up with natural gas are getting hosed because there's a gas constraint in the pipeline, a pipeline constraint for gas coming into New England, and there's a further constraint down in Massachusetts to get it here. We are in the dark ages when it comes to what could be revolutionizing our economy. Again, I don't work for the Koch brothers, I'm not a fossil fuel fan, but pragmatically speaking, we're getting dusted because of this pipeline deficiency. While we're spending $1 billion in Maine on windmills that don't do anything for us, those rare resources should have been allocated to the South to open up these pipelines so that instead of burning 1% oil, there were several days this last winter where we were burning, the New England grid was getting 30% and 35% of its electricity from coal and oil. So not only are we paying through the nose, we're getting the dirty air. I only mention that because that's the southern bookend. There's another bookend to the north. Vast hydroelectric resources out there that are built. And they're building more in the wilderness in Quebec, Newfoundland, big dams, 3,000, 4,000 megawatt dams. Renewable, doesn't burn anything, yeah, floods some earth and so forth, it impacts everything. But they're trying to punch through from the north. What you have right now is wind developers scurrying to get their deals and build their projects at any cost, and they'll tell you anything, because that bookend up there is going to put them out of business, and that bookend down there is going to put them out of business. We're working on solving this huge energy problem that on one day last January sucked $100 million in excess rates, one day, out of New England pockets. There's a huge motivation to fix this problem. It's not dinner time talk for most of us, but I'm here to tell you that the energy markets and the policymakers who are working on this stuff want to get it done, and the wind developers feel the heat. I can hear the music starting to stop, and we're going to run out of chairs to get into. So we actually advocate for delay. Prudence, be careful, protect yourselves. Even if you get built here. Maybe, what's this, 2014? The year 2020, let's say, God forbid, they build this thing. You remember that time that skinny guy from Sargo came and he said, yeah, they're going to go out of business, they're going to leave you holding the bag. Just saying, I said it here. Could happen. So, those are just some general value statements about wind power. There's a little opinion mixed in there. I'm transparent in that regard, but I base everything on facts that I get from the ISO New England, from the EPA, the DEP, the Energy Information Administration, and it's math. Mix the math and the numbers with your gut and go with it. I just hope those of you who are, I don't know how you divide here, if you're like all you guys are for, all you guys are against, I don't know, I really don't care. Hit me with hard questions if you want. Don't insult me. I won't insult you, but do your homework, learn more, like less.
Thanks.
Can you just reiterate what you said about the gas plant in BC, that that's not running the capacity? I mean, could it be? I mean, that's a better way to go.
Not a better way to go. I mean, it's put it this way. It was built when main Yankee closed. That, there's another one in Westbrook, it's almost a mirror image, there's a smaller one, it's about half that size over in Rumford. Bucksport's online, gas, 5 big ones really. And those 5 gas plants are all the juice main needs. And they can run on demand, and they're nimble, you know, they can ramp them up and down to meet demand. A coal plant tends to be, you know, it takes hours and hours, perhaps a day sometimes to get it hot. We don't have those in Maine, and there are very few left in New England. The oil plant down in Yarmouth, Cumberland, is the biggest plant now in Maine. That's a 620 megawatt plant. Infrequently operates. They burn oil. It's the only real oil plant we have here. But they get the call from the grid when it's a real hot day or a real cold day because demand spikes. And the grid does a good job of forecasting where demand's going to be. But they love it down there. They said 2 years ago they took 60% more revenue from what's called capacity payments, like volunteer fire department, a paid fire department to sit around and be ready. They took 60% more capacity payments than in product that they sold. So we've got the capacity. If you're going to close a plant, don't close the Feezy plant. Close that one down there. It burns stinky oil. And they get great prices when the spot price goes up. My point is this. This company came here to Maine, invested, they didn't get tax breaks to do it, they didn't get subsidies to do it, they invested $280, $300 million in that plant. And while a few years ago they were operating at 40% capacity, which is pretty good, producing electricity for 3.9 cents. Last year, I talked to the general manager in January, he said he was under 10% for 2013. Something's got to give. You know,
Because there's no demand, I don't get why that isn't.
there's little demand, but again, I mean, there's little demand for new generation. They built because they knew there was demand for it. But what's happening is the gas constraints are, if there's only so many units of gas that can make it to Maine, households, industrial customers are going to get it first. There's plenty of electricity generation capacity around New England. That oil plant fires up because VZ can't get the gas, or they can't get it at a reasonable price because these are markets, and it shoots up by 10 in a matter of an hour. So they just don't want to play for that. They don't want to lose money. They lose. So it's tricky, but I just used it as an example of how kind of awkwardly obtuse situation we're in. And the last thing we need is to rebuild them more. You know, you don't need 4 Dunkin' Donuts out here. Do you?
Yeah.
Is that another But again, I don't want to stand here and act like a troglodyte. I'm trying to be pragmatic. I think that you've got to divide characteristics of power generation or dispatchability and non-dispatchability. You've got base load plants that are typically like Seabrook Nuclear, the other nuke plants. Natural gas can perform base load, and coal performs base load. Around the country, it's about 40% coal. That's obviously getting nicked every day. And natural gas is cheaper, and it's replacing coal without regulation. Then you get intermittent generation from most of the renewables. Hydro is intermittent. Tidal is intermittent, solar, wind, they're all intermittent. You know, they come and they go. The poison pill for some of them is intermittent and unpredictable. At least the tide's predictable. 6 in, 6 out. Hydro is somewhat predictable because you can sequester it behind a dam. It's like a dam is like a battery. Until the day that solar and wind can be stored economically and technically viably with some sort of energy storage. They're not bad per se, but in a grid scale. I mean, if I got a plug-in Prius, I would love to have a windmill in my backyard to charge it every night. It cost me 45 cents a night to charge it. But if I paid $10,000 for the windmill, it would take me till I was 170 something to pay for the windmill. I'll plug in a CFP. I'm an idealist, but I only make so much money.
Can you say something about decommissioning, just like, what is, when turbines have a lifespan, and when that, so either there's just no demand for it, like you say, 6 years from now, blah, 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 the whole thing will go bankrupt. So then turbines are standing there. Are they ever being decommissioned, or are they standing there and rusting? What's like the reality around the United
It's
States?
an interesting topic. We've been trying to get the DEP in Maine to strengthen its decommissioning requirements, and they have, but we don't think they've strengthened them enough. I'll give you a couple of examples. Number one, the turbines that we've seen since 2006, these little ones up at Mars Hill, these 1.5 megawatts, are midgets compared to the 3 or 4 new generations that have happened almost every year. Over the 6 or 7 years since that was built, there have been iterations that go 1.8, 2.2, 2.5. Now we're seeing 3 megawatt, like up at Oakfield, that's proposed. What I'm saying is, you look at the Ford F-150. One of its great qualities is they built something really good, and they just improve it a little bit every year because they don't need to radically improve it. The wind turbine technology is rapid obsolescence. Those turbines at Mars Hill, up in Worcester County, are operating, and that's actually the best operating plant from an efficiency standpoint in Maine. They've got a great wind resource there if they got lucky. But if they close that, if they wanted to sell those turbines as salvage tomorrow, operating, there's no market for them. What do we want? They could buy better ones. So they're stuck there. Hopefully for them, it's paying. You know, they're getting a production tax credit, they're getting renewable energy credits, they're getting premium mandated, like you got here in Pisgah. You get a premium mandated rate from the PUC, et cetera. So they're kind of propped up. In the next iterations of projects, especially those who don't necessarily get the mandated contracts, they sign long-term contracts with Massachusetts or whatever, they're subject to the vagaries of the market. As I said, when the big hydro comes in, reliable, inexpensive, or at least reasonably priced, when that gas supply comes back, the wind projects aren't going to be able to compete. So they're looking for long-term contracts, 20 years, to lock in a price instead of keeping competitive. They can't get those, and they're having a hard time now.
Do they ever get taken down for scrap?
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
With rapid appreciation, you could be in a situation where the developer has a non-performing asset. You get a store that just doesn't sell anything. Well, you can take the shelves out and get rid of the goods and turn it into an office building. You know, a Walmart can be turned into a factory, right? These turbines are single-purpose entities. So you make it generating electricity, or you make it as a lightning rod. What the danger is they're so propped up by kind of funny money. There's a real danger. We haven't lived it long enough. We've seen a lot of it in Europe. There's a real danger that the LLCs that set these things up see much less risk in just abandoning them, shutting them off, than in decommissioning. Bingham is a project. It's Bingham, Mayfield, Kingfield Township, not Kingfield, Kingsbury Township, all across just this side of Moscow and Bingham. About a 17-mile stretch of wind turbines that they're proposing. We've got a small facility compared to this one. Those are the big guys, 3 megawatts. A $300 million project to build. They're estimating the decommissioning costs to be it's less than $500,000. And we said, what are you talking about? Who recycles fiberglass composite? Who recycles rare earth metals? Chinese steel, it's like Chinese drywall. And how do you store those mountains for that kind of money? What they're asserting is that there's a scrap market for those. That we hired a consultant from Virginia, did a study that showed that they underestimated their decommissioning costs, not by a magnitude of double or triple, but probably 20 or 30. And we're hoping that the DEP puts their hooks into them for that. And, you know, if they're required to fully fund the decommissioning constant project fund, they might say, we're out of here. But again, I don't want to exaggerate. Some of these might last 20 years. And then the turbine pads are there, and you put a new turbine on them, you get rid of the old one, and the next generation turbine is good. But it's not as hunky-dory as they'll have you think. There's a lot of risk there. And in this climate, with the low wind resource that we have, they get beat up. Kitty Mountain, they're replacing them left and right, and they're expensive. Mars Hill has replaced many of them. They get ice on them, and they get thrown out of balance, and they're very big machines, right? And they're coming out of time. It's expensive here. Yeah, it's risky. It's not trying to be a doomsayer, but that's why you protect yourselves.
The study that you just spoke about the, can you tell me the company you said again? You just referenced the
Oh,
study.
decommissioning?
Yes.
Yeah, it's HVA. I think the name of the company was HVA. I can get it to you if you want to buzz me. It's actually in the file for the Bingham Wind project, and I can send that right to you.
Okay.
But we took their study and overlapped it with, we have a financial analyst who does work for us, and we kind of blended the two.